All right, let's dive into some really interesting stuff today. We're talking about black swans.
Not the bird, though.
Right, right, not the bird. We're going to be talking about the idea of black swan events.
Those big world-changing events that nobody sees coming.
Exactly. And to help us wrap our heads around all of this, we've got some excerpts from Nassim Nicholas Taleb's The Black Swan.
Oh, Taleb, he's kind of all over the place, like part essayist, part trader, and he even teaches about uncertainty, so he's definitely someone who thinks outside the box.
Yeah, and that really comes through in his work. Like, he really challenges how we think about predictability.
Totally. Like, he's basically saying we always underestimate how much randomness plays a role in things, especially these really huge events that change everything.
Okay, so let's break this down. What is a black swan exactly, according to Taleb? I mean, I kind of get the gist, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page.
So for Taleb, a black swan has got to have three things. One, you can't predict it. It's totally out of left field.
Okay, so unpredictable. Got it.
Two, it has a massive impact, like it shakes things up big time.
Makes sense. What's number three?
All right, number three is that after it happens, people try to explain it, like, oh, it makes sense now.
So they try to make it seem less random.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just our brains trying to make sense of things after the fact.
So it's not just about something being rare then. It has to be like totally outside of what we thought was possible.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like, think about Google's success. Nobody predicted that.
For sure. Or 9/11. I mean, that was just...
Tragic, yeah. And a total game changer for the world.
Exactly.
And even things that seem super solid, like, the Titanic. Taleb uses that example to show just how much we can fool ourselves into thinking things are safe.
Right, like unsinkable until it wasn't.
Exactly.
So, okay, black swans can obviously be negative, like those examples, but they can also be positive, right? Like Google.
Absolutely. The point is they make us rethink how the world actually works. They show that we don't know as much as we think we do.
Okay, I see that. So where does this whole platonic fold thing fit into all of this? It sounds kind of like a geometry problem to me.
It's more like a philosophy thing. Taleb says we tend to oversimplify the world, like trying to stuff it into neat little categories.
Trying to make it fit our expectations?
Yeah, and that platonic fold he talks about is the point where those simplified views just, like, break down. They don't match up with reality anymore.
Ah, so black swans come from those gaps in our knowledge.
Exactly. And because we're so stuck in our ways of thinking, we miss the signs or we just brush them off as not important.
Okay, this is kind of unsettling. If these things are, by definition, unpredictable, how do we even get ready for them?
That's where Taleb brings in these two countries he talks about, Mediocristan and Extremistan. Figuring out which one you're in is super important for managing risk.
Okay, I'm listening. I'm all ears. What are these countries all about?
So picture Mediocristan, like a place where things kind of average out. No single thing can really throw everything off balance, like human height, for instance.
You mean people are different heights, but nobody's going to be like 100 feet tall?
Right.
Gotcha. So Extremistan is where things get more wild, I guess.
Exactly. It's like one single event can have a huge impact. Like, think of book sales. You could have one book that sells millions and thousands of others that nobody reads.
Or like how wealth is distributed.
Right.
Most of the money is concentrated in the hands of a very few people.
You got it. So, yeah, if you're thinking about black swans, Extremistan is definitely where the bigger risks are.
Okay, I get it. This is all really interesting, but I mean, how does this apply to like everyday life?
It's all about figuring out which country your work or your life even falls into. Are things pretty predictable, or can one unexpected event change everything?
So if you're a baker, you're probably in Mediocristan. One bad batch of cookies won't ruin your business.
Yeah,
But if you're a venture capitalist, well, that's a different story.
that's a perfect way to put it. And once you know which country you're in, you can make better decisions about risk.
This is fascinating stuff. But if we can't actually predict these black swan events, how do we deal with the negative ones, or even take advantage of the positive ones?
Well, that's where Taleb's idea of silent evidence comes in. He says we tend to only focus on what we see, what's right in front of us. We ignore all the stuff we don't see, and that could really change how we make decisions.
Silent evidence. Can you give me an example?
Sure, think about that story of the worshippers who drowned. They didn't pray to the god of the sea, right? So we never hear their story.
Because they didn't survive to tell it.
Right. We only hear about the survivors who did pray, so we think, oh, prayer works.
So we jump to conclusions based on incomplete information.
Exactly. And it's the same with success stories. We see the people who made it big, but not all the people who tried and failed.
It's like we're looking at the tip of the iceberg and ignoring the massive part that's hidden underwater.
You got it. And this can be really dangerous when you're trying to figure out risks.
How
Well, think about someone like Casanova the adventurer. He was always escaping danger. He started to think he was invincible.
Because he survived so many close calls.
Yeah. But eventually, his luck ran out.
So, just because something hasn't happened to us yet doesn't mean it can't happen.
Right. And this applies to everything, from personal choices to whole civilizations. We see cities that have been around for centuries and think they'll last forever, but history's full of cities that just vanish.
Okay, wow. This is making me really rethink how I look at risk. It's like we constantly underestimate the potential for these black swans to happen.
That's a huge part of it. We're blinded by what we can see and by our own desire for a stable, predictable world.
Makes sense. So, if we're so bad at seeing these things coming, can we ever really understand how much randomness affects our lives?
Well, that's where Taleb gets into the limits of prediction, something he's really passionate about.
Okay, let's talk about predictions then. What does he have to say about our ability to see into the future, especially with these black swans lurking around?
He's super skeptical of forecasting, especially when it comes to complex stuff. He says our track record is way worse than we think, and he's got some great examples to prove it.
Like what? Give me an example.
He talks about the study where they asked these so-called expert economists to predict what the market would do in the short term.
Okay. And?
Their predictions were basically as good as random guesses.
Oh, man. That's got to be embarrassing.
Right. But are there people who've actually embraced randomness and done well? Because right now, planning for the future feels kind of pointless.
It does feel a bit overwhelming.
Well, Taylor points to people who understand that we can't predict everything, and so they focus on building strategies that can handle anything. Like, he mentions this biotech company that started a Fat Tails Club.
Fat Tails Club. What is that?
It's because they realize that those big, unpredictable events happen more often than traditional models say they should.
So instead of trying to predict which specific black swan would hit, they just prepared for any kind of shock.
Exactly. And this ties into the idea of, like, maximizing serendipity. Taleb says we should be open to unexpected opportunities, experiment more, because some of the best stuff happens by chance.
Okay, I'm starting to feel a little more optimistic now. So it's not about living in fear of these black swans. It's about accepting that they're part of life and changing how we make decisions.
That's exactly it. Taleb calls it skeptical empiricism, which basically means questioning what we think we know and being open to learning from what actually happened.
I like that. It's like a blend of healthy skepticism and a willingness to learn from experience, especially the unexpected stuff.
You got it. And, you know, when it comes to questioning what we think we know, Taleb really goes after one of the most popular tools in statistics.
You mean the bell curve?
That's the one. That beautiful, symmetrical curve that's supposed to show how things are usually distributed.
Yeah, what's wrong with that? I mean, it seems to make sense.
Well, Taleb calls it a great intellectual fraud. He says it's been misused for a lot of real-world stuff, especially in Extremistan.
So he's saying that the idea that most things cluster around the average, that's not always true.
Exactly. The bell curve works fine in Mediocristan where things don't stray too far from the average.
Because those deviations don't really matter that much.
Right. But in Extremistan, where those outliers, those really unusual cases, can have a huge impact, the bell curve just doesn't cut it.
Okay, I'm seeing the problem here. We're using a model that assumes stability and predictability in a world that's, well, anything but.
That's it. It's like trying to navigate a hurricane with a map of a calm sea.
Yeah, that's not going to end well.
Nope. And Taleb uses wealth distribution as a perfect example of this. If wealth really followed a bell curve, most people would be clustered around the average, with a few really poor people and a few really rich people.
But that's not how it works at all.
Right. Wealth is way more skewed, with a tiny percentage of people holding a huge chunk of the wealth, like that 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
So this has big implications for how we think about risk and make decisions. If we're relying on models that assume a bell curve, we're probably way off in terms of how likely those extreme events, those black swans, really are.
So if the bell curve isn't the right tool for Extremistan, what should we be using instead?
Well, Taleb suggests this idea of Mandelbrottian or fractal randomness. He says a lot of real-world stuff, especially in Extremistan, has this fractal structure.
Okay, hold on. Fractal. That sounds a little abstract.
Think of a coastline. If you zoom in on a map, you see more and more details, but the basic shape stays kind of the
So
same.
it's like the pattern repeats itself at different levels.
Exactly. That's a fractal. And in these systems, even tiny events can set off a chain reaction that leads to something way bigger than you'd expect.
So it's not that these extreme events are totally random, it's that they come from these underlying patterns that we might not fully grasp or even be able to predict.
That's a great way to put it. By understanding this fractal nature of things, we can get a much better handle on risk and unpredictability.
This is really making me rethink how I think about probability and statistics. It's like we've been using the wrong map for this territory.
It kind of is, and if these black swans are more common than we realize, and our usual models can't handle them, what are we supposed to do?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Well, Taleb's answer is skeptical empiricism. It's about combining a healthy skepticism of those big, overarching theories with a willingness to learn from experience, especially when things don't go as planned.
So it's not about throwing out all models and theories, it's about using them carefully and understanding their limits.
Exactly. We need to really test our models, find their weaknesses, and be ready for those situations where they just don't work.
I like that. It's like a stress test for our assumptions,
Yeah.
a way to prepare for those potential black swans that could really shake things up.
And this leads right into Taleb's advice on decision-making in a world full of black swans. He recommends this barbell strategy. It's about balancing safety in areas where black swans could be devastating, with taking smart risks in areas where they could lead to big rewards.
Okay, break that down for me. This barbell strategy, how does it work in real life?
It's all about finding that sweet spot between protecting yourself from ruin and setting yourself up for breakthroughs. In areas where a black swan could be catastrophic, like the stock market, Taleb says to be super conservative.
Don't risk everything on one bet.
Exactly. Focus on protecting what you have and minimizing those potential losses.
Makes sense. But what about the other side of the barbell? How do we prepare for those positive black swans, the unexpected opportunities?
That's where taking calculated risks comes in. Experiment, try new things, and be open to those lucky breaks.
It's like planting seeds,
Right.
right? You don't know which ones will grow, but the cost of planting a lot of seeds is pretty low compared to the potential payoff from even one that takes off.
I love that analogy. And Taleb also emphasizes this idea of optionality. It's about creating situations where you have the right, but not the obligation, to take advantage of opportunities that might pop up.
So it's about having choices, flexibility, so you can adapt to whatever happens.
Exactly. And that takes experimentation, exploration, and being open to those unexpected turns of events. Remember that story about Apelles, the painter who accidentally created a masterpiece?
I think I remember that one.
He tossed a sponge at his canvas, and boom, a work of art. Sometimes the best stuff comes from those unexpected moments.
This is really making me think differently about planning. It's not about abandoning plans altogether, but about building in flexibility and adaptability.
That's the key. We have to accept that unexpected things will happen and be ready to change course when they do.
This brings up another important distinction: noise versus signal.
In a world drowning in information, it's easy to get distracted by the noise, all the irrelevant, sensationalized stuff. The signal, on the other hand, that's the valuable information that can actually help us make good decisions.
It's like trying to have a conversation in a room full of people shouting.
Exactly. How do we tune out the noise and focus on the signal, especially with these black swans potentially lurking around?
It's tough.
Taleb says our brains are wired to pay attention to the dramatic, the exciting stuff. But a lot of times, that's just noise. We need to be way more critical of the information we take in, question our assumptions, and be wary of anyone who claims to have all the answers.
This is making me rethink how I consume news and social media. It's so easy to get caught up in the drama of it all.
I know, right? But now I'm seeing how that can really distort how I see the world and make me worry about things that might never happen.
Exactly.
And this ties into the importance of what Taleb calls epistemic humility. It's about recognizing that we don't know everything and being open to the possibility of being wrong.
So it's not about being wishy-washy or lacking confidence. It's about being honest with ourselves about what we know and being willing to learn new things.
You got it. Taleb says this kind of intellectual humility is crucial for navigating a world of black swans. It allows us to be more adaptable, more resilient, and ultimately more successful in the long run.
Wow, this has been such an insightful look into the world of black swans. We've covered a lot of ground, from the limitations of our traditional models to the power of this skeptical empiricism.
It's been great exploring these ideas with you. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought. What if everything we've talked about so far is just the tip of the iceberg? What if the world is even more extremistan than we currently realize?
That's a pretty scary thought. If the world is even more extremistan than we think, how does that change? Well, how does that change everything?
I think it means we have to rethink some pretty basic assumptions, Like, we can't just rely on what's happened in the past or those old models to figure out a future that might be way more unpredictable.
So how do we even get ready for a future where black swans are not just possible, but likely?
Well, it starts with how we think about things. We need to accept that uncertainty is just like a fundamental part of reality.
So instead of trying to fight against the unknown, we have to learn to roll with it, get more comfortable with the fact that we can't predict or control everything.
That's the idea. Taleb talks about this concept of anti-fragility. It's not just about being tough, it's about actually getting stronger from shocks and disruptions.
That's a really cool idea. Like, think of a muscle. It gets stronger when you work it out, when you push it.
Exactly. The more we expose ourselves to, manageable stress, the better we become at handling the unexpected.
Makes sense. And this applies to everything, right? Our jobs, our investments,
Yeah.
even our relationships and personal growth.
Absolutely. We have to move away from just avoiding risk and towards like intelligent risk management.
So how do we actually use this barbell strategy in our own lives? What are some things we can do?
One big thing is diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. Spread your bets around different things, different skills, different experiences.
So if one area gets hit by a black swan, we're not totally out of luck.
Right. Another strategy is cultivating optionality. Basically, create choices, create flexibility so you can adapt to whatever comes your way.
So instead of locking in on one plan, we make multiple plans, multiple options.
Yeah, exactly. This takes experimentation, trying new things, and being open to those happy accidents. Remember the story about Apelles, the painter?
Yeah, the one who accidentally created a masterpiece.
He threw a sponge at his canvas. Sometimes the best stuff comes from the most unexpected places.
This is really making me think. It's about being open to the unknown, trying new things, and understanding that failures can lead to amazing things.
That's a great way to put it. And that leads to another really important thing, developing intellectual humility.
So being okay with not knowing everything and being willing to change our minds when we get new information.
Exactly. In a world of black swans, being stuck in our old ways of thinking can be really dangerous. We have to be lifelong learners, always updating how we see the world and adapting to new information.
This whole deep dive into the world of black swans has been incredible. It's really challenged how I think about things, made me see things from a different perspective, and given me a new way to understand risk, uncertainty, and how unpredictable life can be.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. And remember, the point isn't to be scared or to give up on planning altogether. It's about understanding how the world works on a deeper level and getting better at handling all those surprises that come our way.
So let's embrace the challenge. Let's build that flexibility and resilience so we can not only survive the tough times, but thrive in the face of those unexpected events that shape our lives.
It's been great talking about this with you. I hope this deep dive has inspired you to look at the world in a new way and to approach the future with curiosity, adaptability, and, a healthy dose of skepticism.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of black swans. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and remember, the only thing that's for sure is that things will change.